In 1856, at a federal boarding school in Georgia, USA, a woman was found dead. But the first thing that made people shudder was not the death. It was the autopsy report. It was submitted 7 days before the woman died. The paperwork was detailed. The handwriting was precise, the signature of forensic Dr. Edwin L. Cartwright, famous for his precise description and demanding parallel notes in all medical records. However, when asked, Cartwright coldly replied, "I never performed that autopsy." At the bottom of the paper below the signature were 2 lines of handwriting scrawled, not matching the rest. "I did not perform this." She requested to be sent back to August. No one was arrested. There was no investigation. No one asked why the autopsy report arrived before the death. Why? Because someone somewhere had stamped it in red? Approved. Time perspective. That summer, an archivist happened to open File Box 12 at Wilton Seminary. What gave him the creeps wasn't the autopsy report. It was the date. Amid the attendance records and uniform repair reports, there was an autopsy report stamped by the Georgia State Medical Examiner's Office, sent not to a doctor, not to the school superintendent, but to an entity no one had ever heard of, the Internal Affairs Division, an organization no one knew existed. Inside a single sheet of paper, clean and sharp. Victim female, approximately 38 years old. Condition of the body, no signs of violence, but brain tissue shows signs of rapid decay incompatible with biological age. Time of death, August 12, 1856. Date of report, August 5, 1856. 7 days before death. Dr. Cartwright and the blank diary pages. At the time of the report, no one had died. All students, teachers, and staff had been fully accounted for. No funerals, no missing persons reported, no bodies buried. So, why such a detailed description in the report? Lungs folded, retinal hemorrhages, a faint trace at the base of the skull. Impossible to see without an autopsy. Cartwright, the disreputable doctor, had kept a detailed record in his personal notebook that week. He had seen only 2 cases, a premature birth, a broken arm. There had been no autopsy. There had been no transfer to Wilton, a name that should not exist. The school principal, Miss Calvert, had, upon discovering the report, sent a written request for clarification. She had received only silence. On the edge of the complaint, one could find the following in faint pencil: "No sick, no funeral. The list will be reviewed." And when the secondary list was reviewed, a name that had never appeared in the student records, payroll, or personnel records was discovered: E. Holloway, Taylor, room number 3. But according to the engineering map room, number 3 had been vacant since May. A retired janitor recounted during the 1874 financial audit that he had been asked to clean up the blood in room 3 in mid-August. And the strangest thing was, the order to clean up was signed before the blood appeared. Ghost signature. A few months later, when Cartwright was called to confront the report, he simply read it silently from beginning to end. Then he asked, "Why is the signature mine? But the rest of it isn't mine." A handwriting expert in Atlanta confirmed the signature was genuine, but the text had a lighter hand pressure, and the soft, strange strokes, especially the spelling of continuity, appeared twice, but not in his personal notebook. In the right corner of the report page, under layers of discolored paper, a faint red mark remained. When magnified, the words came out clearly. Mishandled, not to be destroyed. No body, no death. But the file remained. No body was found. No death was witnessed. But to this day, in the official Georgia State database, there is still a pending record. Holloway A. Status in review. And that report, to this day, sits in the archives, fading away. Are you ready to enter the place where death comes after the autopsy report? Give it a heart, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you were and what time when you heard this. Because there is a comfort we are all following the same story that spans time. No key to room number 3. The door had no lock, no handle, no sign of forced entry. And yet, it had remained closed for 3 years. Maintenance records from 1853 confirmed that the room was structurally sound, unoccupied, used only lightly for storage. But then, something unusual began to appear. 3 orders for linen, 3 requests for food. Not a single furniture returned. No one knew what was inside, and no one had kept an inventory of who had been there. Penciled an unofficial name in the spring 1856 duty roster in the margin, faintly penciled, Mrs. E. Her name was mentioned very rarely in official records. In the paybook, she was listed only once with the strange note: pay-in free lodging, something that did not exist in the school system. The head nurse, Mrs. Agnes Doyle, a former Army field nurse, recorded Mrs. E only once in the health examination record. Refused examination. Advised to rest. Pale skin. No fever. Speech slow. Hands very cold. That report was crossed out with a sharp line, as if to erase it from reality. The one who doesn't belong. A few students years later remembered seeing a strange woman in the East Wing. One described her as being well-dressed but without color. Another said she always sat in the same chair. But when questioned further, no one had ever spoken to her. One student recalled leaving her homework outside room 3, thinking it was the new teacher's office. The next morning it was returned with notes in blue ink. No one in the school used that color. No photos except one. No photos of the interior of the East Wing. No photos of the room. No photos of Mrs. E. Only one photo of the exterior taken on the south porch that same summer. If you zoom in on the second window from the right, you'll see a figure sitting there, hands clasped, blurry, face blurred. But the figure was that of a middle-aged woman. The window was wide open, even though the weather report said it was hot that day. Still air. No one should have opened the window. Strange request and mismatched handwriting. In August, the logistics manager noted a strange request. Need navy blue thread, small, needle oil, lamp wick. Please do not disturb. No one sent it. An envelope was left in the mailbox. The handwriting was strange, not matching anyone. Compared to 3 other signatures in the East Row roll call, all were the name E. Holloway, but none were the same. No one knew where she came from. But everyone accepted she was there. Principal Calvert, in a brief internal investigation, wrote of Mrs. E, "There is no official record of employment, but her name appears on 6 weekly lists, each signed by a different person." When asked, no one admitted to hiring her, but no one seemed surprised that she was there. She had no specific job, but she showed up on the cleaning schedule. She didn't take mail, but there were 3 unclaimed envelopes on her desk. She didn't teach, but a student wrote Mrs. E as her morning reading teacher in her diary. No student reported her absent. No teacher marked her tardy. She was present until she wasn't. Room 3 sealed and opened again. On August 13, the day after her supposed death, Room 3 was sealed. But just a week later, on the dormitory floor, Plan Principal Calvert signed, Room 3 occupied. Beneath that line in faded blue ink was a single letter, O. And the last time her signature appeared, it was 7 days after the burial. The book that should not be kept. In the last drawer of the main desk in the east wing, rusty and rotten, a book lay. Faculty Sign-In Register, 1856. The oilcloth cover was darkened. The spine bent from 3 humid summers. The brass plate in front read, Faculty Sign-In Register, 1856. The name E. Hall appeared 43 times from March to August. Never the same stroke. Once in smooth left-leaning handwriting like a pre-war secretary. Once in a scrawl, each stroke stiff like a child's, writing with his weaker hand. Once in all caps, May 4th, the letters were spaced haphazardly. Another time, June Sag, just a big E, no last name. And the strangest, July 18th and 25. Her name appears twice on the same day, signed at 2 different times in 2 opposite handwritings. This is not a forgery. It is an unintentional inconsistency. That was the conclusion of a handwriting expert who analyzed the roll call book. The signatures bearing the name E. Holloway. 43 occurrences were all different. There was no pattern, no purpose, no repetition. Each signature corresponded to a non-existent person. No classroom logs were attached, no teaching evaluations, no recorded interactions with students. Many times, the timing of the signatures contradicted other events in the records. On June 13th, she signed at 7:04 a.m. But then the technical report confirmed Room 3 had been locked from the outside all morning. Principal Calvert's hidden diary. Principal Calvert, who held the position before her disappearance, had been secretly investigating. In a locked notebook hidden in her own desk drawer, she wrote, I began to circle the times she signed. There was no cycle. There was no pattern. Sometimes the ink was so thick it bled onto the next page. Sometimes it was so light, it almost disappeared. A signature looked like it had been rewritten, not rewritten. The weekly staff list often didn't include her name, and when it did, the title always changed. This week it was seamstress. The next week it was a lecturer. Another week it simply read attached, personal file. Just a single sheet of paper, thin as scrap paper, unsigned. The start date was simply spring. No year. Below the torn edge of the paper was a faint pencil inscription. Continued presence approved. Sign and disappeared and reappeared. Calvert's successor, Administrator Lydia Pike, wrote to her superiors in complaint. This woman's file is a maze of loops. All attempts to trace it back to the roll call book. But that roll call book itself is unstable. I believe, though it is difficult to say, that its pages do not always appear in the same order. The roll call book was locked and the signatures disappeared overnight. That August, the roll call book was locked in a cabinet after a clerk discovered 3 signatures E. Holloway had disappeared overnight. A photocopy kept at the university decades later shows on one of the missing pages there was still an imprint, a signature that had never been filled in. It was written with an inkless pen, the employee left the school the following year. In her resignation letter, she wrote tersely, "Mental fatigue." She left a small note in her personal workbook. "I copied your signature just once." The next morning, it reappeared, this time in my own handwriting, on the last page of the original roll call book, Fahad, on a date that did not exist in the calendar that year. One death, two schedules. The name, Mrs. E. Holley, made its final appearance in an unlikely place. The weekly duty roster tacked to the bulletin board on the East Wing. A hot summer week in August. A simple list, Tuesday, August 19th. Needlework, intermediate level. A small task. Normal. Except her autopsy report clearly stated the date of death as August 12th. A duplicate schedule, 1 week off. A new employee, Marianne Hela, was working to modernize the school. While reviewing the quarterly schedule, she discovered it wasn't a typo. It was two identical schedules down to the class times, room numbers, and material requirements. There was only one difference. One ended the week on August 25th. The other ended on August 18th. Both had Principal Calvert's official stamp and signature. Both were duly issued, posted on different bulletin boards. In the filing cabinet in the middle of the hallway, both copies were side by side. Neither had been crossed out. Neither had been marked obsolete. Two calendars, two realities. The separation of schedules does not stop at the lesson plan. In the kitchen's food order book for the week beginning August 10th, two orders are recorded. One is for fresh vegetables for Tuesday the 12th, another for Tuesday the 19th. Both orders state, "To Mrs. E. Room number 3, strange testimony from the housekeeper. During the 1862 audit, Clara Rowe, the middle-aged housekeeper, testified, I cooked an extra portion every Tuesday in the summer of 1856. I never saw the recipient. When shown the two different calendars, Mrs. Rowe paused, then whispered, They are both correct. I remember them both. That statement was erased from the audit report. Calvert's private diary. 2 days in one. In the secret diary, between pages of Principal Calvert's handwriting, on August 11th she wrote, Staff meeting tomorrow, Tuesday 12. But just 2 pages later, dated Friday, she noted, The dressmaking instructor is here at 8:00 a.m. as scheduled on the 19th. The writing is continuous. No erasures, no panic. Calvert never mentions the duplication, but her timeline is fractured. Yearbooks and maps change by themselves. The draft of the 1856 yearbook lists Mrs. E as the instructor in charge of domestic arts until the end of August. But in the official printed version, her name disappears. In the margin, a red note. Calendar does not match. Need to double check. At the same time, the school map posted in the staff room was quietly altered. Original, the narrow transit. C corridor connecting the administration building to the east dormitory. New. The same corridor, but labeled. Temporary access. Closed until further notice. No one approved the change. The clock that never goes past. 11:59. A strange envelope was found under the school's main bell. Inside was a torn print from an old calendar, dated August 19th, 1856. The problem, there were fingerprints on the paper, but they were under the ink. And they did not match anyone in the personnel file. Principal Calvert's final report, submitted shortly before her abrupt resignation, contained an unusual footnote. She was there on any day. The ink doesn't care which week you choose. The staff room roll call book. A stamp from a non-existent day. On August 19th, the words appeared. E. Hall. Present. A faint red stamp superimposed over it. Date not recognized by central office. No one knows who submitted the report. The night of August 11th, when time stands still. Since 1839, the bronze pendulum clock mounted at the top of the stairs of the girls' dormitory, the West Hall regulator has kept time through 3 principals and a fire. But on the night of August 11th, it stopped. It kept ticking, but the hand did not go past 11:59. The maintenance man's report the next morning read, no mechanical fault, no obstruction. When turned by hand, the minute hand slid forward, then back. The last line of the log read, still heard ticking, but nothing changed. One time, many people. That night, 5 employees clocked in using the new system installed outside the side staircase. A night nurse, 2 teaching assistants, a kitchen assistant, and 1 unidentified person. All time cards bore the same time, 11:59 p.m. Miss Hella, a young administrator who is trying to standardize working hours notes in the payroll. 5 records, same time, 11:59. Unexplainable. Time is leaking. The schedule is split in 2. A woman's existence caught between 2 clocks. Not broken, but not correct. The technical report from the watchmaker who had installed the ink-based timekeeping system was clear. No signs of damage. The mechanism was replaced in July. He replaced the ink drum anyway, just in case. In his maintenance log, he noted, the movement is absolutely accurate. The internal timing gear is off by 1 minute, but only visible when removed. The outer dial is still working properly. The duplicate times cannot be explained. A note from an anonymous nurse. A nurse whose name was later removed from the records had written in her duty book, the clock struck midnight 3 times, but the time did not change. The note was underlined, twice circled in blue pencil, a color not given to staff. The diary was never kept, disappeared from the records, the wordless scratch and the message in the wall. After the incident, 3 vertical scratches, 5 inches deep, were found on the wooden wall below the grandfather clock. There was no sign of a struggle. No students were missing, injured, or had left the room. But when the walls were repainted the following spring, they found, on the back of the clock, carved into the plaster, "She never left." The handwriting did not match anyone else in the school. A student had drawn the picture a week earlier. In the picture, a small figure standing at the bottom of the stairs below the stationary clock. The note written in a child's handwriting, "If you stand still long enough, it will forget what time is." Principal Calvert wrote in a secret letter, "Don't try to match the time from the time card. The watch is correct. It is waiting." In 1860, the regulator was removed. A new model was installed, the hands moving smoothly without ticking. The old watch was sent to the local museum. Still stopped at 11:59. Death before cause. The forensic file on E. Hollow is shocking. It does not follow the usual medical order. It goes the other way. It is filed in a yellow folder marked for internal viewing only. On the cover is the date August 5, 1856. Handwritten underneath Cartwright EMD. The problem Cartwright denied ever having been to the school. His report was prepared a week before the body was found. medical abnormalities that could not have preceded death, paralyzed skin after death, bilateral collapsed lungs, possible strangulation-like injuries to the back of the neck, no fall, no signs of illness, no one reported illness, and no injuries noted in the days before. Medical details known only to one person. The coroner's report noted third rib, left partially fractured at sternum, evidence of previous surgery. But there were no records of surgery. No one at the school knew, except for head nurse Miss Doyle, who discovered the old surgical wound under the scar on August 12th. But Cartwright's report had noted it 7 days earlier. Letter to Georgia. Department of Health. Arrived before body found. A copy of the report was mailed on August 10th, but arrived 2 days before the body was discovered. The envelope was unstamped, undated, and sealed with red military wax, the kind not used in civilian medical offices. Postal logs confirmed. No one signed for it. No one sent it. It just showed up. On Principal Calvert's own copy, she wrote in the margin, "It's not a forgery. I recognize his handwriting, but the body was found in the schoolyard, and not before the 12th. Time doesn't pass. Death doesn't wait. And what exists at Wilton Seminary has begun to drown out the truth with its own fractured time. No incision. I saw it. She was still breathing." That was the final statement from Miss Doyle, who witnessed E. Hollow alive. And then what made everyone freeze was a single note in parentheses written under the final diagnosis. Subject, clearly aware of entry point, requested not to close. Close what? Wound. Records. Time. Cartwright denied it and collapsed. When questioned in a closed session, Dr. Cartwright said only, "I dreamed I wrote that report, but I never actually did the autopsy." He could not explain the ink, the notes, or even his own signature. 3 weeks later, he was fired for his mental instability. His later diary was full of loops, and a single repeated sentence. The body comes first, but not always. The record of temporary death. Unprecedented. The Ministry of Health marked the record as prematurely created, a classification only used for battlefield corpses with unknown commanders. At the bottom of the report page, the code number appeared. C1856 Company. Looked up in the military archives. Company appeared next to only one term. Continuity, continuity. In the right corner, the ink was faint. The handwriting was shaky. Return to August. Wilton, a school that belongs to nowhere. Wilton had no coat of arms, no flag, no bronze plaque, rudimentary pillars, simple expense logs. Parents believed they were sending their daughters to a moderately prestigious boarding school. The truth. Nothing was local. An 1854 entry in the financial records of Georgia's 10th district reveals Wilton was granted federal status under the name Wilton Preparatory Educational District, Eastern Campus. No signature, only the approval code CT04NA and the black wax seal. No symbol, just a downward pointing triangle. No Department of Education. The money went through the Civilian Laboratory, an obscure branch of the Continuity Research Bureau, a federal agency that existed for less than a year. The school does not appear on public maps. No inspection reports. Teachers are not local. Internal records all use the original federal code. A curious June 1856 request is labeled Special Distribution Continuous Liaison Officer. This title does not exist in the civilian system. Sealed Agenda, 1901. A 1901 memo from the Congressional Subcommittee on Irregular Expenditures calls Wilton Class C establishment under the Internal Continuous Protocol. A delegate asks, "What does that mean?" The chairman simply replies, "Educational models are tested in unstable time." No further explanation. Teachers without records. Rooms without doors. The surviving documents show 4 personnel without any employment history. Among them, Mr. Ford, a night lecturer of the Arimto department, content unknown, only appeared in a July salary slip. His office is listed as Room 4, East Wing. But there is no door. Not in the blueprint. Calvert's final letter and the sealed budget box. Principal Calvert wrote in a letter to the Georgia State Council of Women Teachers, "Although I operated as a boarding school, I was never asked to submit a curriculum, nor was any application received. Each year, the budget arrived in a sealed box, with the expenditure items already filled out. Even her appointment letter bore a watermark, DCS, Node Region 2, a nickname for the Bureau of Continuity. The 1853 building permit revealed something unusual, not issued by the local authority, but by a military engineering unit from Fort McPherson. Some of the construction was listed as completed on the plans, but no aerial photographs were taken, not on later maps. A license reads for non-Euclidean use. No architectural disclosure required. Wilton is more than a school. It is an experimental block, a model of time, a point of intersection between memory reality and the breakdown of cause and effect. On October 31st, 1856, just weeks after E. Holloway's sealed autopsy report appeared, the DCS was disbanded. All relevant documents were sealed, boxed, and shipped to the Federal Archives in Albany, except for one box that was never inventoried, Box 27, Personnel Transfer and Dismissal Records, Wilton East Facility. An investigation opened, then quietly closed, but one form remained. August 14, 2 days after E. Holloway's recorded death. Content: request for 1 additional administrative staff. Preferred non-residential, but room 3 accepted. Approval stamp. DCS Alpha CT, retroactive, unclaimed. Unsigned, under the hazy wax, a line of carbon appeared, reinstated. And 7 days after the official burial, the initials EH reappeared. The unknown photo until 1931. In an old account book, Wilton's Annual Inventory 1856, a photograph slipped out from the spine, stuck there for nearly 75 years. Silver nitrate, print, yellowed corners, faded ink on the back. Home Economics, July 1856, East Lawn. No photographer's stamp, no date of development, no name, just a small pencil mark in the border. Airway, 12 people in the photo, 10 young girls in uniform. One believed to be Principal Calvert. One woman, possibly an embroidery teacher, all standing in a straight line, expressionless. Calvert has a vague sense of humor, but on the right edge of the photo, slightly behind the students, is a woman. Perfect posture, slight smile, quiet but unusual gaze. And then, lower left corner in the shadowy area, another figure. At first thought it was a photo error. Blurred light, damaged frame. But through the old photo analysis, the truth was revealed. It wasn't an error. It was a person, a woman, same figure, same face, same outfit. One in the middle clear smiling, one on the edge shadowed, distorted. But all were E. Holloway. Expert. It can't be a double exposure. The camera used at Wilton was a wet plate collodion, which required the glass plate to be replaced by hand after each shot. If there was a mistake in developing the photo, the whole picture would be ruined. But everyone in the picture is clear except for one. Next to the photo is the photographic plate case with no caption on the outside, aside from the number 6 written in red crayon and a very thin indentation. Stillness. Stillness. This word did not exist in the Wilton textbook that year. Charlotte D's diary, age 11, written on July 10th, 1856. Miss Holley helped me to fasten my collar. I hope I look right, but I thought I saw her in the yard. She waved to me as I left the dormitory, but she was out there. Calvert's diary, that same week, makes no mention of the photo shoot. But there is a strange directive dated July 12th. No more photographs to be taken this semester. Unclaimed prints, burn. No explanation. The photographer, Henry Clark, disappeared. He was a contract traveler. Disappeared in August 1856 on his way back to Savannah. His carriage was found overturned in a ravine. Among the recovered luggage, 5 cracked glass negatives, only one small useful fragment. In that fragment, the upper part of a woman's face, matching the silhouette in the schoolyard photograph. A man who died twice. A man who reinvented himself. A photograph that did not lie, but also did not tell. The photo, Holloway's second shadow, eventually lost. Years later, when the copy was officially archived, a new note was found, written on the back of the archive cover. Duplicate female image found, checked against faculty records, inconclusive, access restricted, and inside the spine of the notebook that had hidden the photo for nearly a century, a rusted line of ink was read. One of the two must be wrong. No one knows who submitted the report. And from here, things took an even stranger turn. Wilton's seminary attic, east, where the dust was thick and the heat was like a second skin. There a stack of student papers was found, without a code, without a label, with only a fading pencil note. Imagery. 32 rough pages, mostly childish. Cats' houses, stick figures, all harmless. But 4 drawings made adults speechless. Drawn by 4 different girls. Same time, July 1856. Not in the same room. One was a new student. No one witnessed E. Holloway's death. And all depicted the same scene. A grown woman stretched out on a stretcher or a narrow table, surrounded by clocks, pendulums, wall clocks, pocket watches, even hourglasses. Although the times were displayed differently, the hour hand always pointed to 11. One girl added a second face, under the bed faintly reflected. Another scrawled the words, "She is still thinking." None of the girls knew about the death, according to Calvert's diary. The drawing was part of a dream-based teaching experiment. The idea came from psychologist W. Embry Hest, who has no traceable medical record. In his notes, dated July 16th, he wrote, 4 matching pictures. No instructions, no connection. Stop experiment. The drawing session was cancelled the next day. The 4 girls were moved to separate rooms. Student diary. Annalise T. 10. Discovered by her brother on a school tour after many years. The woman was looking at her watch. She said it was too late, even though it hadn't happened yet. The girls were interviewed separately by their childcare manager, Miss Hella. She wrote in the margin, "They don't tell the dream, they tell the location." Where the woman stood which way she faced what she touched before she lay down. Although each child said one time, the clock in the picture said another. The most horrifying detail all drew the woman with 6 fingers on her left hand. Some were bent. Some were pointing backwards. One child drew it, facing backwards. One drawing signed Mbe was later found under the mattress in room 3. The paper was soft from being folded many times. The ink was smudged, but the image was clear. The woman was lying on the table, smiling lopsidedly strangely. Behind her was a silhouette of the same woman, standing and watching. And at the bottom, in red pencil, she told me to draw before she forgot. August 10, 1856, early morning. The linen cart arrives in room 3, pushed by a janitor, later stated on the direct orders of Principal Calvert. But there is no such note. Calvert's diary is blank that day. Room 3 is listed Level B. Incinerate all contents. Level B. Only in case of disease or rat bites. But Nurse Doyle did not report sick. The infirmary had no quarantine. 5 hours of cleaning included burning bed sheets, clothes, comb, pieces of paper, mirror with cracked frame, later note, all incinerated immediately after removal. Drawer faces etched, window frames burned. No odor left. The word drawer bottom etched, drawer. Bottom etched never explained. One last oddity. The storage box was labeled A.H. Holloway and vacant. This was before the death was reported. The room assignment on the 10th still read, Room 3 occupied. And the oddest thing, Holloway, there was no record of her personal effects. At Wilton, all teachers were required to declare their possessions for government-funded property insurance. Hers completely blank. In 1856, Miss E. Holloway, a simple teacher at Wilton Seminary, died suddenly. But that was only the beginning. A sealed autopsy report, a strange class photo, and an inexplicably altered administrative record set off a chain of events that seemed to transcend time and human perception. A shadow appears twice in the same photograph. A room is recorded as empty then filled, then disappears from the records. Miss Holloway's name is recorded as absent, then quit, then returned, then completely gone. No one remembers her coming, but someone remembers her leaving. And somewhere, there's always someone smiling. The same face, the same figure, standing on the margins of the edited memories. A series of witnesses either disappeared or lost their minds or left behind fragmentary but terrifying statements. I wrote the report before she died. I saw her in the hallway, but I also saw her in the yard. Something is torn, it can't be sewn back together. If I write something before it happens, is that a memory? When the documents are re-examined, the notes, the blurred handwriting, the invisible traces of time, they tell a story that is not logical but also undeniable. E. Holloway's existence is an error in the timeline, a crack in the continuum, noted by the system but never acknowledged. The woman, she said, wore gloves. Her hair was pinned back, her posture was straight. When asked who she was, she did not hesitate. The woman who never actually came. When shown blurry archival photos from the 1850s of the Wilton contingent, only 5 of which survived the school's closure, she pointed to E. Holloway without prompting. "She's dead," she said calmly, but still turning the corner. A handwritten note next to the recording of the interview read, "The patient is not delusional. Description matches the second floor plan of the Wilton dormitory, unchanged since 1856. An additional interview with a retired Wilton housekeeper by then, in her 80s, confirmed her memory of the girl, quiet, pale, docile, staring into mirrors and not fond of talking in public. She had heard the girl whisper that room number 3 had 2 doors, but only one opened outward. There was no drawing in the file that showed that room had 2 doors. After her death, her personal belongings were inventoried. Among them was a torn page from a notebook drawn in charcoal. The drawing was crude but clear: a narrow hallway, a figure walking down the middle, and 2 shadows slowly converging from either end. The face was blurred as if on purpose. Scrawled beneath the drawing were the words, "She said she wasn't done yet." No patient in the ward was known to have attended Wilton, nor were any relatives connected to the school. But her memory clung to that hallway, that footstep, a moment that never ended. Dr. Edwin L. Cartwright, who was closely associated with the Wilton phenomenon, wrote in his personal journals about the inertia deviation hypothesis in individuals who deviate from their chronological order. He died before the theory was published. An 1895 internal memo from the Bureau of Civilian Supervision lists 5 surviving Wilton students for permanent observation. Only one name is not blacked out: the girl who claims to have seen Mrs. E 2 weeks after the burial, walking slowly through the hallway, carrying a package, the very thing that burned with her body. At the bottom of the memo, a warning is stamped in large letters: "Do not reissue the quarterly list. Return of entity not confirmed." The page is not torn, nor is the ink smudged. It is intact. The folds are correct. The printing is clear. But when you pick it up, it feels wrong, as if the document itself knows too much about itself. E. Holloway's Autopsy, now famous in the Internal Medical Archives, ended not with a conclusion but with a confession. Just below the official cause of death, possible rupture of continuity, was a line handwritten in ink: "I did not perform the operation." The writing was small and neat, very similar to Dr. Cartwright's in his notebook. The strokes, the pressure, the way the D&T were written were all the same. But the signature line was blank. Just below, in a different ink, thicker, older the red of old iron ink, appeared a second line: "She requested August to be returned." The phrase was non-medical, non-legal, unverifiable by any standard, but it fit perfectly into the original document's layout. A 1906 spectral analysis showed that the first line had been added a few hours after the report was completed. The second line, about returning to August, was dry before the page was printed. There were no nurse's notes, no clinical notes, no other copies that mentioned the line except the original that was sealed in the Wilton East Archives before they were destroyed. The first person to read it. Hayler paused for minutes after seeing the line. In her diary, she simply wrote, "Neither line should exist. And I don't know which is worse." The first line posed the obvious question: who performed the autopsy? The second was even more chilling. Where was she returned from? In later copies, the second statement was removed. But on a surviving microfilm in a different file, Time-Related Incident, Wilton, Volume B, the line was still faintly visible under the chemicals. A note beside it, largely blacked out, read only, "Do not include in training materials. May trigger recall language, recurring language, a form of language that repeats itself only when observed." Cartwright's last note, 2 days before he was committed to the asylum, read, "She is not dead. She is in the wrong file." That's all. All the time is just filing. In a photograph of the Wilton, hearing the report is seen in Cartwright's hand. A magnification shows his finger covering the last part of the text, as if even then he was trying to hide the irrevocable. The original was sealed in lead after 1871. It has not been opened since. The only warning on the envelope is, "Read only when reappearing." She is not listed in the personnel file. Her belongings were burned before she died. The autopsy was filed before she stopped breathing. But the symbol for her name continued to appear long after the third room was sealed. If the body never arrived and the report was never written, then what was buried?